My name is Cleon, 67 years old, and I own a lakeside house worth $1.2 million that I built with my own hand. Since my wife passed away 5 years ago, my daughter Amanda and her husband Justin have been acting differently around me. Last Thanksgiving, while bringing drinks to the dining room, I overheard Justin telling his parents about moving them into my house for free while sending me to a retirement home. I simply smiled. If you want to know what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story about family betrayal will show you why patience is sometimes the ultimate revenge. Before diving deeper into what happened that Thanksgiving, let me give you some background about myself and my family. I worked as a structural engineer for over 40 years before retiring at 62. My wife Martha and I had built a beautiful life together in our lakeside home in northern Michigan. We purchased the land when we were in our 30s, and over the course of 15 years, I designed and built most of the 3,000-square-foot home with my own hands, hiring specialists only for electrical and plumbing work. The house sits on 2 acres of land, with 100 feet of private shoreline on Lake Charlevoix. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room offer a panoramic view of the water and the surrounding pine trees. A wraparound deck allows for outdoor entertainment during the warmer months, and I built a stone fireplace that Martha always said was the heart of our home during those long Michigan winters. The property has 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen that Martha designed herself, and my pride and joy, a workshop in the detached garage where I still spend most of my days creating wooden furniture. After Martha passed away from cancer 5 years ago, the house felt emptier but remained filled with memories. Every corner held a story of our 4 decades together. The market value might be $1.2 million, but to me, the sentimental value was priceless. Martha and I had agreed that eventually the house would go to our only daughter, Amanda, but we always imagined that happening far in the future, when I would be truly ready to downsize. Amanda, 34, had been the center of our world, a smart, compassionate woman who followed in my footsteps and became a civil engineer. Martha and I had always been proud of her accomplishments and her independence. When she married Justin 6 years ago, we welcomed him into our family with open arms, though Martha privately expressed some reservations about him to me. Justin, 32, worked as a real estate agent, though his career hadn't been particularly successful. He came from a middle-class background, his father Frank having worked as a high school math teacher and his mother Diane as an administrative assistant. They lived in a modest home about 30 miles away, in a less affluent neighborhood. Justin always seemed to have big ambitions, but lacked the work ethic to achieve them. He drove an expensive car that he could barely afford, and was constantly talking about property values and investment opportunities. In the beginning, Justin visited often with Amanda. After Martha passed, they would come over on Sundays for dinner, and Justin would help with yard work occasionally. But I noticed a change in him about 2 years ago. His questions became more focused on the house, the property taxes, and whether I had considered downsizing. At first, I thought he was showing genuine concern for my well-being as a widower living alone in a large house. When Amanda announced she was pregnant with their first child a year and a half ago, the visits became less frequent. They explained they were busy preparing for the baby, which I understood completely. Little Sophia was born 8 months ago, and while I adored my granddaughter, I only got to see her every few weeks when Amanda would bring her over for short visits. Justin usually stayed behind, claiming he had house showings or other work commitments. What struck me as odd was that while family visits decreased, Justin started calling me more often with questions about the house. Had I updated my will since Martha passed? Was the house fully paid off? Had I considered adding Amanda as a co-owner for estate planning purposes? Each question seemed innocent enough on its own, but collectively they painted a picture that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I learned from Amanda that Justin's parents, Frank and Diane, were facing financial difficulties. Frank had retired from teaching 2 years ago, but their retirement savings had taken a hit during the market downturn. They had also co-signed on a business loan for Justin's younger brother, who subsequently declared bankruptcy, leaving them responsible for the debt. They had put their house on the market but hadn't found a buyer yet. I had only met Frank and Diane a handful of times over the years, mostly at holiday gatherings and Amanda's wedding. Frank seemed like a decent, humble man who was clearly uncomfortable when Justin would boast about their future inheritance prospects in front of me. Diane was more difficult to read, quieter but with a calculating look in her eyes that reminded me of Justin. As the months passed, I began feeling like a specimen under observation rather than a father and father-in-law. The questions about my financial situation, the house, and my future plans became more frequent and less subtle. Still, I never imagined they would go as far as plotting to move me out of my own home until that fateful Thanksgiving day. In the month leading up to Thanksgiving, I noticed several unusual patterns that, in retrospect, were clear warning signs of what was to come. Justin and Amanda suddenly started visiting more frequently. They would drop by unannounced, sometimes twice a week, with Justin often arriving before Amanda joined us after work. During these visits, Justin would wander around the house, examining rooms and taking photos that he claimed were for Amanda to help plan their holiday decorating. One evening in early November, Justin called asking for my input on a home expansion. He claimed he and Amanda were considering adding a sunroom to their modest ranch house and wanted my engineering expertise. When I arrived at their home the following weekend, the conversation quickly shifted to my house instead. Justin casually mentioned that my master bedroom was perfectly positioned for a sunroom addition. He even pulled out a rough sketch of my house's floor plan, with surprising accuracy, showing where such an addition could go. When I questioned why he was planning changes to my home rather than his own, he quickly backpedaled, saying he was just using my house as a model to understand structural considerations. Amanda looked uncomfortable during this exchange but remained silent. When Justin left the room, I asked her if everything was okay, and she assured me they were just excited about home improvements in general. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Around this time, Frank and Diane began making more appearances in my life as well. Despite living 30 miles away, they suddenly found reasons to be in my neighborhood. Diane would bring over baked goods, commenting on how spacious my kitchen was compared to hers. Frank would offer to help with yard work, using these opportunities to ask detailed questions about the property's maintenance costs and the reliability of local utility services. During one such visit, Diane spent an unusual amount of time in my master bedroom and adjoining bathroom. When I passed by, I overheard her on the phone saying, "It would need new wallpaper, but the space is perfect." When she noticed me, she quickly ended the call and claimed she was talking to her sister about bathroom renovation ideas. My suspicions grew stronger when my neighbor Barbara, a retired nurse who had been friends with Martha, stopped by one afternoon in mid-November. She mentioned seeing Justin showing an older couple around my property while I was at my weekly veterans lunch meeting. She described them as taking measurements of the exterior and peering through windows. When I confirmed the description matched Frank and Diane, Barbara expressed concern about their intentions. "Watch out for that son-in-law of yours, Cleon," she warned. "Something doesn't feel right about the way he looks at your property, like he's already claiming ownership." I thanked Barbara for her concern, but didn't share my growing suspicions. I wanted to give my daughter and her husband the benefit of the doubt, though seeds of doubt had definitely been planted. The most alarming incident occurred 3 days before Thanksgiving. Justin had left his jacket in my living room after a visit, and when I picked it up to hang it, a folded paper fell from the pocket. It was a sketch of my master bedroom, completely reimagined with different furniture placement, new paint colors, and notes about removing my built-in bookshelves to make room for a television unit. In the corner of the paper, in Justin's handwriting, were the words, "Mom and Dad's Room Phase 1. My heart sank as I carefully refolded the paper and returned it to his pocket. I wanted to confront him immediately, but decided to wait and observe. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. Perhaps Amanda was planning a surprise renovation for me as a Christmas gift. But deep down, I knew something more sinister was brewing. That evening, I received a call from Justin, sounding somewhat panicked, asking if he had left his jacket at my house. When I confirmed I had found it, his relief was palpable. He insisted on coming over immediately to retrieve it, despite the late hour. When he arrived, he quickly checked the pockets before thanking me with unusual effusiveness. As he was leaving, he mentioned that he, Amanda, and his parents would all be joining me for Thanksgiving dinner, something we hadn't previously discussed. "Mom and Dad are really looking forward to it," he said with a strange smile. "They've been talking about your place a lot lately." "Have they?" I responded, keeping my tone neutral while studying his expression. "Oh yeah. They just love the lake view. Reminds them of the vacation home they always wanted but could never afford." He laughed as if sharing an inside joke with himself. After he left, I sat on my deck overlooking the lake, Martha's favorite spot, and contemplated what was happening. The jacket incident, combined with Barbara's warning and the increasing frequency of unusual visits, painted a troubling picture. Something was definitely amiss with my son-in-law's sudden interest in my home, and I had a growing suspicion that Thanksgiving would reveal what he was planning. The next day, I called Walter, my attorney and friend of 30 years, and asked him to stop by for coffee. Without sharing my specific concerns, I asked him to review my will and property documents, ensuring everything was in order. Walter sensed my unease and reminded me that the house was solely in my name and that no one could force any decisions about my property without my consent. "Just be careful, Cleon," he advised as he left. "Family dynamics can get complicated around inheritance expectations." As Thanksgiving approached, I decided to remain vigilant but welcoming. If Justin and his parents had plans involving my home, I wanted to understand the full extent of their scheme before deciding how to respond. After all, as my dear Martha used to say, knowledge is power, and patience reveals truth. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a crisp chill in the air and the first light dusting of snow on the ground. Despite my growing concerns, I was determined to host a warm, traditional holiday meal as Martha and I had done for decades. I spent the morning preparing her signature recipes, the aromas of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie filling the house with bittersweet memories. I had set the formal dining table with Martha's heirloom china and silver, adding a centerpiece of pine cones and autumn leaves that I had collected from our property. Everything was ready by 3 in the afternoon, though dinner wasn't scheduled until 5. Amanda had texted that they would be arriving around 4:30, explaining they needed to pick up Frank and Diane on their way. At 4:15, the doorbell rang unexpectedly early. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find Frank and Diane standing there with 2 large suitcases and several shopping bags. "Frank, Diane, you're early," I said, unable to hide my confusion at the luggage. "Are those suitcases?" Diane pushed past me into the foyer, her eyes scanning the house appraisingly. "Justin mentioned we might stay over if the weather turns bad. Better safe than sorry, right? Where can we put these for now?" Before I could respond, Frank added apologetically, "Hope that's okay, Cleon. Diane packed a lot just in case. Weather report mentioned possible snow tonight." I glanced outside at the barely visible dusting of snow and the clear sky, then back at their excessive luggage. For a potential one-night stay, they had packed as if planning for a week. Nevertheless, I showed them to the guest room where they could store their things, noting how Diane ran her hand along the walls and furniture as we walked through the house, almost possessively. When we returned to the living room, I offered them drinks while we waited for Amanda and Justin to arrive. Frank accepted a beer nervously, while Diane requested a tour of the house, claiming she had forgotten the layout despite having visited several times recently. As I reluctantly led her through each room, she made comments that now seemed loaded with hidden meaning. "This master bathroom is certainly spacious for just one person," she remarked, measuring the shower stall with her eyes. "Frank and I could easily share this." In my workshop, she wrinkled her nose and said, "This would make a perfect exercise room with all this junk cleared out," referring to my carefully organized tools and half-finished furniture projects. By the time we completed the tour, Amanda and Justin had arrived with baby Sophia. Justin immediately hugged his parents with unusual enthusiasm, asking in a low voice that I wasn't supposed to hear, "Did you see the lake view from the dining room? Can you believe it?" As we all settled in the living room, I excused myself to check on the turkey and prepare drinks for the newcomers. In the kitchen, I gathered a tray with wine glasses and a bottle of Martha's favorite Cabernet that I had been saving for special occasions. As I was about to return to the living room, I heard Justin's voice carried clearly from around the corner. "So it's all set. We talked to Sunrise Haven last week. They have a nice single room available next month. It's perfect timing." My hands froze on the tray. Sunrise Haven was a local assisted living facility. I remained still, listening. "But what if Cleon doesn't want to move?" Frank's voice sounded concerned. "This is his home, after all. He built it himself." Justin laughed dismissively. "Dad, he's getting older. Living alone isn't safe anymore. Amanda and I have power of attorney if needed, though I don't think it'll come to that. We'll convince him it's for his own good." "And you're sure we can move in right after?" Diane's eager voice chimed in. I already gave notice at our apartment. Absolutely, Justin confirmed confidently. Once Cleon is settled at Sunrise, you two can move in immediately. No more rent, no more mortgage. Just maintenance costs that we'll split. The lakefront property, all to ourselves. What about the legal aspects? Frank asked, still sounding uncertain. The house is still in his name. That's the beauty of it, Justin explained. We're not changing ownership yet. On paper, it's still his house, so there are no gift taxes or complications. But we all get to enjoy it. Eventually, it passes to Amanda anyway. This just speeds up the timeline a bit. And Amanda is okay with all this? Frank pressed. There was a pause before Amanda's voice, quieter than the others, responded, Dad's been lonely since Mom died. The house is too much for him. I think Sunrise would give him more social interaction. Her words felt like a physical blow. My own daughter, Martha's child, was justifying this scheme. She hadn't initiated it, from the sound of things, but she was complicit. Plus, Justin added smugly, we can finally sell that tiny house of ours and use the money for renovations here. Frank, you can have the workshop converted into your man cave. Diane, you can redo the master suite however you want. I already have paint samples, Diane said excitedly. That gloomy blue has to go immediately. The gloomy blue was Martha's favorite color, which she had carefully selected for our bedroom walls. How soon do you think we can bring up the Sunrise Haven idea to Cleon? Frank asked. Today, Justin replied confidently. After dinner? He's always more agreeable after a good meal. We'll present it as if we've been researching options, thinking only of his well-being. And if he refuses? Frank persisted. He won't, Justin said with chilling certainty. Amanda's his only family. He'll do whatever makes her happy. Plus, we can mention how Sophia needs a bigger yard to play in as she grows up. He won't deny his granddaughter anything. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the wine bottle still unopened in my hand, as the full impact of their conspiracy washed over me. They weren't just planning to suggest a retirement community, they were actively plotting to move me out of my own home under the guise of concern for my welfare. And they were planning to present this scheme today, at Thanksgiving dinner, around the table where Martha and I had hosted family gatherings for decades. The pain of betrayal was immediate and overwhelming. My son-in-law was the architect, his mother an eager participant, his father reluctantly going along, and my own daughter allowing it all to happen. They planned to use my love for Amanda and Sophia as emotional leverage to take my home. I took several deep breaths, willing myself to remain calm. Confronting them immediately would only lead to denials and possibly accelerate their timeline if they knew I was onto them. Instead, I needed time to process this information and develop a response that would protect both my home and my dignity. With hands that barely trembled, I finished preparing the drinks tray and plastered a smile on my face before returning to the living room. As I entered, the conversation immediately shifted to the weather and Sophia's recent achievements. Justin caught my eye and raised his glass in a small toast, a gesture that now seemed laden with hidden meaning. To family, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, I replied steadily, looking directly at him. To family and the true meaning of home. After dinner, as I had anticipated, Justin steered the conversation toward my living situation. With practiced concern in his voice, he mentioned that he and Amanda had been researching options for seniors who might benefit from more social interaction. Frank and Diane nodded enthusiastically as he described Sunrise Haven's amenities, while Amanda remained unusually quiet, avoiding my eyes. I listened attentively, asking occasional questions about the facility, noting the relief on their faces at my apparent receptiveness. When Justin mentioned that they had already scheduled a tour for next week, I simply nodded and said I would consider it. The look of triumph that passed between Justin and Diane was barely concealed. As they discussed the practical aspects of such a move, I excused myself to make coffee, needing a moment alone to collect my thoughts. In the kitchen, away from their scheming, I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes briefly. Martha's voice seemed to whisper in my mind. Don't let anger cloud your judgment, Cleon. Think strategically, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The initial shock and pain were giving way to a cold, clear determination. If they wanted to play this game, I would play it better. But I needed time and information to develop my counterplan. When everyone had finally left around 9 that evening, with Justin promising to call the next day about the Sunrise Haven tour, I sat alone in my favorite armchair overlooking the moonlit lake. For hours, I contemplated my options, weighing different approaches and potential outcomes. By midnight, the outline of a plan had formed in my mind. First thing Friday morning, I called Walter, my attorney. Given the holiday, I was surprised when he answered, but our 40-year friendship meant he recognized the urgency in my voice. "I need your advice on a delicate matter," I began, before explaining everything I had overheard. Walter's indignation on my behalf was palpable, but his legal mind quickly engaged with the problem. "They haven't done anything illegal yet," he clarified. "Discussing plans, even manipulative ones, isn't against the law, but attempting to pressure you or mislead you could potentially constitute elder abuse or fraud." "I don't want to file charges against my own daughter," I said firmly, "but I need to protect myself and teach them a lesson they won't forget." Over the next hour, Walter and I outlined a strategy. First, I would appear receptive to the Sunrise Haven idea, even agreeing to tour the facility. Second, I would suggest a trial period where Frank and Diane could stay in my house while I tried out the retirement community. Third, and most importantly, I would secretly make arrangements that would give me complete control of the situation when the time was right to reveal my awareness of their scheme. After finishing with Walter, I called Barbara, my neighbor and Martha's old friend. Her outrage at what I told her quickly transformed into enthusiastic support for my developing plan. As a retired nurse who had worked with elderly patients, she offered to accompany me on the Sunrise Haven tour, posing as a concerned friend while actually helping me gather information about the facility that might prove useful later. "Those ungrateful schemers," she fumed. "Martha would be heartbroken to see Amanda involved in this." "I think Amanda is more follower than instigator," I said, trying to be fair despite my hurt, "but she's still accountable for her choices." Next, I called James Wilson, another neighbor and local real estate attorney who had handled several property matters for me over the years. After swearing him to secrecy, I outlined what I needed, and he promised to get the paperwork started immediately, working through the weekend if necessary. By Saturday afternoon, I had made several discreet inquiries about Sunrise Haven, gathering enough information to convincingly discuss the facility with Justin and Amanda. I also drove around several neighborhoods about 15 minutes from my current home, identifying a few properties that might suit my actual needs if my plan required me to move. On Sunday morning, Justin called as promised, eager to confirm Tuesday's tour of Sunrise Haven. I agreed readily, suggesting that Barbara would join us as someone familiar with elder care options. I could sense his hesitation at including an outsider, but was prepared for that. "Barbara's insight would be valuable," I insisted mildly. "She worked with seniors for years and knows what questions to ask." Reluctantly, he agreed, though I could tell he was recalibrating his approach to account for Barbara's presence. This small victory gave me confidence that my counterplan could succeed. Over the next few days, I maintained a careful balance of seeming open to the Sunrise Haven option while subtly gathering more information about Justin and his parents' financial situations. Through casual conversations with mutual acquaintances and some strategic questions to Amanda about their household finances, I confirmed my suspicions that all three were in precarious financial positions. Justin and Amanda's mortgage was underwater after some unwise home equity loans. Frank and Diane had depleted their retirement savings, covering their younger son's failed business venture. All of them were desperately seeking financial security, and my lakefront property represented their solution. Understanding their motives didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me refine my approach. They were operating from a place of financial fear, making them predictable and potentially careless. Tuesday's tour of Sunrise Haven went exactly as I had anticipated. The facility was pleasant enough but clearly designed for seniors requiring significant assistance. Barbara skillfully pointed out that I was far too independent for such a restrictive environment, planting seeds of doubt that even Justin couldn't easily dismiss. The staff, picking up on the strange dynamic, directed most of their questions to me rather than Justin, further undermining his control of the situation. By the end of the tour, I had established myself as the decision-maker, while gathering valuable insights about the facility's costs and contracts. Justin seemed frustrated but tried to hide it, emphasizing the social aspects and safety features on our drive home. That evening, alone in my workshop, I put the finishing touches on my plan while crafting a small wooden box from cherry wood Martha had always admired. As I sanded the smooth surfaces, I reflected on how Martha would have handled this situation. She had always been more direct than me, more willing to confront deception head-on. But she had also taught me the value of patience and strategic thinking. Sometimes, she had once told me, the best response to manipulation isn't immediate confrontation, but allowing people enough rope to reveal their true intentions. With that wisdom guiding me, I prepared to give Justin, Diane, and Frank exactly what they thought they wanted, while ensuring they would ultimately receive the lesson they deserved. A week after Thanksgiving, I invited Justin and Amanda over for dinner, telling them I wanted to discuss my future options in a quieter setting. Their eagerness to accept was telling. Amanda asked if she should bring Sophia, and I encouraged it, knowing that Justin would see his daughter as an additional emotional lever in the conversation. I prepared Martha's famous lasagna, knowing it was Amanda's favorite comfort food from childhood. As we ate, I deliberately kept the conversation light, asking about their work and Sophia's development. Justin seemed impatient but played along, likely assuming I was avoiding the retirement home discussion. After dinner, with Sophia sleeping in the portable crib they had brought, I poured 3 glasses of whiskey and sat them down in the living room. "I've been thinking about what you mentioned at Thanksgiving," I began carefully, noting how they both leaned forward eagerly, about Sunrise Haven and downsizing. "Yes, Dad," Amanda said tentatively. "We just want what's best for you." Justin nodded with exaggerated sincerity. "The social aspects alone would be beneficial, Cleon, and the staff there can help with medications and appointments." I took a slow sip of whiskey, deliberately prolonging the moment. "You know, after your mother passed, this house started feeling quite empty. I thought I was managing well enough, but the tour of Sunrise Haven made me realize something." "What's that?" Justin asked, barely containing his excitement. "Perhaps I have been isolated," I admitted, watching relief wash over their faces. "The maintenance of this place does get overwhelming sometimes." Justin could hardly contain himself. "That's exactly what we've been concerned about. You shouldn't have to worry about a big house at your age." I nodded thoughtfully. "I think I might be open to trying Sunrise Haven for a short period, just to see if it suits me." The triumph in Justin's eyes was unmistakable. Amanda looked more conflicted, a flicker of guilt crossing her features before she composed herself. "That's wonderful, Dad. I think you'll really enjoy it there." "There is one concern, though," I added, watching their expressions carefully. "This house shouldn't sit empty while I'm away. Security issues, you know. Pipes freezing in winter, that sort of thing." Justin jumped on this opening exactly as I had anticipated. "You're absolutely right. Actually, I was thinking Amanda and I could stay here temporarily, just to keep an eye on things while you try out Sunrise Haven." I shook my head slightly. "You two have your own home and routines. It wouldn't be fair to disrupt that." I paused, as if an idea had just occurred to me. "But what about your parents, Justin? I heard they're having some housing issues." The look of shocked delight on Justin's face was almost comical. He quickly tried to appear casual. "Well, yes, they are between places at the moment. But I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," I insisted. "Frank and Diane are family now, too. If I'm going to try out Sunrise Haven, they could stay here and look after the place. It would help everyone." Justin could barely contain his excitement as he pulled out his phone. "Let me call them right now to see if they'd be open to the idea." Of course, Frank and Diane were miraculously available to talk despite the late hour. Justin put the call on speaker, and I repeated my offer. After a show of reluctance that fooled no one, they agreed enthusiastically. "Are you sure, Cleon?" Frank asked, the only one showing genuine hesitation. "It's your home, after all." "I insist," I replied firmly. "Consider it a trial arrangement. I'll try Sunrise Haven, you try living here, and we'll see how everyone feels in a few weeks." The plans came together with remarkable speed after that. Justin suddenly discovered that Sunrise Haven had an immediate opening for a month-long trial stay. Frank and Diane could move in the following weekend, allowing us all to adjust to the new arrangement gradually. Over the next few days, I acted the part of a man preparing for a major life transition. I packed a few suitcases with clothes and personal items. I organized my medication and important documents. I even asked Amanda to help me select which photographs to take to make my new room feel more homey. When Friday arrived, Frank and Diane showed up with a moving truck rather than suitcases. Their previously half-hearted pretense about a temporary arrangement had completely disappeared. They arrived at 10 in the morning, eager to settle in before my scheduled check-in at Sunrise Haven at 4 that afternoon. I gave them a comprehensive tour of the house, showing them how the heating system worked, where the circuit breakers were located, and other maintenance details. Diane barely paid attention, too busy measuring windows for curtains and discussing paint colors on her phone with an interior decorator. Frank at least had the decency to look uncomfortable at his wife's behavior. "I can't thank you enough for this opportunity, Cleon," he said quietly when we had a moment alone. "I want you to know we'll take good care of your home." I patted him on the shoulder. "I know you will, Frank. Just remember, a house is more than walls and a roof. It's memories and feelings, too." He nodded, looking slightly confused by my philosophical tone. If he sensed deeper meaning in my words, he didn't pursue it. By 3:30, Frank and Diane had moved most of their belongings into my bedroom, despite my suggestion they use one of the guest rooms for now. Justin and Amanda arrived to drive me to Sunrise Haven, bringing Sophia along in what seemed like a calculated move to distract me with grandparent emotions during this transition. As I placed my suitcases in their car, I glanced back at the house I had built with Martha. Diane was already rearranging furniture in the living room. Frank was examining my workshop with a tape measure. They had wasted no time claiming the space as their own. Justin mistook my thoughtful gaze for sadness. "Don't worry, Cleon. You'll love Sunrise Haven, and we'll visit often. This is for the best." I smiled at him with more warmth than he deserved. "You know, Justin, I believe everything will work out exactly as it should." The check-in process at Sunrise Haven went smoothly, thanks to Barbara's advance work. She had befriended several staff members during our tour and subsequently visited to explain the family situation from her perspective. The administrators understood I was there under unusual circumstances and promised to accommodate any reasonable requests during my stay. My assigned room was comfortable though basic, with a single bed, small kitchenette, and a view of the facility's garden. Justin and Amanda helped me unpack my minimal belongings, their movements rushed as if eager to return to their new lakefront property. Before they left, Amanda hugged me with genuine emotion. "I'll bring Sophia to visit this weekend, Dad." "I'd like that," I replied, hugging her back while wondering how she had allowed herself to become part of this scheme. After they departed, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I had 5 calls to make before dinner. The first was to Walter, confirming that all legal documents were ready. The second was to James, verifying that our property arrangements were proceeding as planned. The third was to Barbara, who would be keeping an eye on my house and reporting back on any developments. The fourth call was to a local moving company, booking their services for 2 weeks from today. The fifth was to Detective Michael Sanderson, an old friend from my volunteer work with veterans, who had agreed to be present during the culmination of my plan, not in an official capacity, but as a witness and deterrent to any potential confrontation. As I ended the final call, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. The game was in play now, and all the pieces were moving according to plan. In just 2 weeks, Justin, Diane, and Frank would learn a valuable lesson about greed, respect, and the consequences of betraying family. Over the next 2 weeks, I settled into a routine at Sunrise Haven while monitoring developments at my house. Barbara reported that Diane wasted no time making changes, bringing in painters for the master bedroom and hiring landscapers to remove Martha's beloved rose garden to make space for a hot tub. Frank seemed more restrained, but was actively converting my workshop into what Justin had called his man cave, selling or storing my woodworking tools without consultation. Justin and Amanda visited Sunrise Haven twice, each time with Sophia in tow, as if to remind me why this arrangement was supposedly for the best. Justin spent most of these visits subtly promoting the benefits of making my stay permanent, while Amanda seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. During their second visit, when Justin stepped out to take a phone call, Amanda confessed she was having doubts. "Dad, are you really happy here? It seems so institutional despite the nice facilities." "I'm adjusting," I replied carefully. "How are things at the house? Are Frank and Diane settling in well?" Her expression revealed volumes. "Mom would be horrified at what Diane is doing to your bedroom, and they've already hosted 2 dinner parties, showing off their new lakehouse to their friends." I simply nodded, filing this information away. "Change is part of life, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to let go of the past. She looked at me strangely, clearly surprised by my philosophical acceptance. Before she could probe further, Justin returned, steering the conversation back to the benefits of full-time residence at Sunrise Haven. When they left, I called Walter to confirm that everything was ready for our plan's culmination. Then I began preparing invitations for what I called my New Beginnings gathering, to be held at my lakehouse the following Saturday evening. I personally invited several Sunrise Haven staff members who had been kind to me, along with Barbara and a few other trusted neighbors. I asked Amanda to extend invitations to Justin's parents and a few of their friends who had attended their recent dinner parties. I suggested that Justin invite the real estate colleagues he had been showing the property to under the guise of celebrating my successful transition to retirement living. Everyone accepted eagerly, though for vastly different reasons. My allies came to support me, while Justin, Diane, and their circle came, expecting to celebrate their acquisition of a valuable lakefront property. On the day of the gathering, Barbara picked me up from Sunrise Haven early in the morning. We drove first to the county clerk's office, where Walter was waiting with final documents requiring my signature. Then we proceeded to my house, arriving while everyone else was out. Using my keys, we entered quietly and made several subtle preparations for the evening's events. By 6 that evening, the house was filled with about 30 guests. Justin had arranged for catering, apparently willing to invest in a celebration he thought would cement his family's claim on my property. Frank looked uncomfortable in the role of host, while Diane proudly showed off the changes she had already made to their new home, including plans for extensive renovations. I circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations on my wise decision from those unaware of the true situation. At precisely 7:30, when everyone had arrived, I asked for their attention by tapping a spoon against a champagne glass that Martha and I had used for special occasions throughout our marriage. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this new chapter in our lives," I began, noting the self-satisfied smiles exchanged between Justin and Diane. As many of you know, I've spent the past 2 weeks at Sunrise Haven, while Frank and Diane have been staying in my home. Justin raised his glass in a premature toast to new beginnings and family looking after each other. Several guests murmured in agreement, though Barbara and my other allies remained silent, watching with knowing expressions. "Yes, to new beginnings," I echoed, allowing my gaze to sweep across the room. "This house has been my home for 35 years. My late wife, Martha, and I built it together, raised our daughter here, and filled it with love and memories." I paused, noting Amanda's sudden discomfort and Justin's impatience. When I overheard plans on Thanksgiving to move me to a retirement home and bring Frank and Diane in to live rent-free, I was deeply hurt. A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Yes, I heard everything while bringing drinks from the kitchen. The scheme to convince me I could no longer care for myself, the plans to redecorate my bedroom, the intention to convert my workshop to a man cave. Justin's face drained of color. Diane froze mid-sip of her champagne. Frank closed his eyes in what appeared to be shame. Rather than confronting this betrayal immediately, I decided to see how far it would go. I let Justin arrange the Sunrise Haven tour. I agreed to the trial period. I watched as Frank and Diane moved in with far more belongings than a temporary stay would warrant. I observed as Diane began redecorating, and Frank sold my tools. I listened as Justin told his colleagues about his family's new lakefront lifestyle. The room had gone completely silent. Amanda was staring at Justin with dawning horror, as if fully realizing the extent of his machinations for the first time. "What you didn't know," I continued calmly, "was that during these 2 weeks, I wasn't just sitting in a retirement homeroom contemplating my twilight years. I've been quite busy." I nodded to Walter, who stepped forward with a folder. 3 weeks ago, I sold this house to a lovely young couple, Mark and Sarah Abernathy. I gestured to a surprised-looking pair standing near the back, who Barbara had invited as my guests. The sale was completed last week, with a leaseback arrangement allowing me to host this gathering. They take full possession on Monday. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. Justin stepped forward, his face contorted with shock and anger. "You can't do that," he sputtered. "This is Amanda's inheritance. You've always said the house would go to her." "The proceeds from the sale have been placed in a trust," I explained, ignoring his outburst. "Half the money will go to Amanda upon my passing, provided she completes the financial literacy course the trust requires. The other half has been donated to a veterans housing project I've supported for years. "But where will you live?" Frank asked, looking genuinely concerned despite his role in the scheme. I smiled. "I've purchased a lovely 2-bedroom cottage about 15 minutes from here. Single story, easy to maintain, but with a workshop where I can continue my woodworking. Barbara will be my neighbor." Turning to Frank and Diane, I added, "You have until Monday to remove your belongings. The moving company has been instructed to assist you." Diane found her voice, shrill with indignation. "You tricked us! You let us believe we could stay here!" "Yes," I acknowledged without remorse. "I let you believe what you wanted to believe, just as you tried to manipulate me into giving up my home." At this point, Justin made a move toward me, his expression threatening, but stopped short when Detective Sanderson stepped forward, his presence a clear deterrent. "Before anyone says or does something they might regret," I continued, "you should know that I have recordings of the Thanksgiving conversation where this scheme was first discussed, as well as subsequent conversations about moving me out permanently." This was a calculated bluff I had expected no one to challenge, but Justin surprised me. "That's illegal. You can't record people without their knowledge." Walter smoothly interjected, "Michigan is a one-party consent state for recordings, Mr. Peterson. If Cleon was part of the conversation, he had every legal right to record it." Justin deflated visibly, his legal counterattack neutralized. I turned to address all the guests. "I apologize for the dramatic revelation, but I felt it important to set the record straight. This gathering isn't just about new beginnings, it's about respect, honesty, and the true meaning of family." My eyes found Amanda's tear-filled ones. True family doesn't scheme to take what isn't offered. True family doesn't view aging loved ones as obstacles to personal gain. True family honors the memories and wishes of those no longer with us. As the implications of my words settled over the room, I raised my glass once more. To true family, wherever we find it. And to Martha, whose wisdom guided me even in her absence. The aftermath was both predictable and surprising. Diane stormed out, dragging a shell-shocked Frank behind her. Justin attempted damage control with his colleagues, failing miserably as they quickly distanced themselves from his evident duplicity. Most guests tactfully departed, leaving only my true supporters and a devastated Amanda. When the room had cleared except for Barbara, Walter, and Amanda, my daughter approached me with tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I knew what Justin was planning, and I didn't stop it. I told myself it was for your own good, but deep down, I knew it wasn't right." I took her hands in mine, my anger softening at her genuine remorse. "The hardest part wasn't Justin's scheme, Amanda. It was hearing your voice go along with it. I don't know why I let him convince me," she sobbed. "Maybe because things have been so tight financially, or because he can be so persuasive when he wants something. But that's no excuse." "No, it's not," I agreed. "But recognition of a mistake is the first step toward making amends." As she continued to apologize, Sophia began crying from her carrier. Amanda picked her up, cradling her close as her tears subsided. Looking at my granddaughter, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The trust will provide for Sophia's education. That part of my plan hasn't changed. But trust, once broken, must be rebuilt slowly. Amanda nodded, understanding the road ahead would not be easy. "What about Justin?" "That's for you to decide," I told her gently. "But know that whatever path you choose, you and Sophia will always have a place in my life." As the evening drew to a close, I stood on the deck overlooking the lake one last time as the owner of this beloved home. The moon reflected on the water, just as it had the night Martha and I had first dreamed of building here. Though selling the house had been painful, there was also a sense of liberation in letting go, in refusing to be manipulated, and in charting my own course forward. Barbara joined me, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Martha would be proud, Cleon. You stood up for yourself while still protecting Amanda and Sophia's future." I nodded, watching the moonlight ripple across the water. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary ones. For them and for me. The weeks following my revelation brought significant changes for everyone involved. Frank and Diane moved out as required, returning to their apartment with considerably less enthusiasm than when they had arrived. Justin, facing embarrassment among his colleagues and the collapse of his scheme, retreated into resentful silence, avoiding direct contact with me. Amanda, however, began a painful process of self-examination. 3 days after the gathering, she came to Sunrise Haven to help me move into my new cottage. As we packed the few belongings I had brought, she confessed the full extent of their financial troubles. "Justin took out a second mortgage without telling me," she admitted, folding my sweaters with trembling hands. "He invested in a commercial property deal that fell through. We're underwater on the house payments, and his commission checks have been smaller than he claims. Financial pressure can make people desperate," I acknowledged, "but it never justifies deception, especially toward family." She nodded, tears forming again. "I keep thinking about what Mom would say if she knew I'd gone along with this." "Your mother believed in second chances," I told her, "but she also believed in consequences and accountability." By the time we finished moving my belongings to the cottage, Amanda had reached a decision. "I'm going to stay with Sophia at my friend Laurel's place for a while. I need space from Justin to think clearly about our marriage." I respected her choice, offering support without trying to influence her decision about her marriage. Over the following month, Amanda visited my cottage regularly, sometimes with Sophia, sometimes alone. We rebuilt our relationship conversation by conversation, painful truth by painful truth. Frank called several times, each conversation an awkward mixture of apology and justification. "I knew it wasn't right," he admitted during our third call. "But Diane was so excited about lakefront living, and Justin made it sound like you'd be better off." "We all face moments when we must choose between what's convenient and what's right," I told him. "Those choices define us." Diane never called or apologized. According to Frank, she felt I had humiliated them deliberately and saw herself as the victim in the situation. I wasn't surprised, merely saddened by her inability to recognize the harm in their actions. Justin made one attempt at reconciliation, though his motives were transparent. 6 weeks after moving into my cottage, he appeared on my doorstep with a bottle of whiskey and a forced smile. "I think we got off on the wrong foot with this whole situation," he began, as if we'd had a minor misunderstanding rather than his orchestrating a plan to take my home. "Amanda misses you, and I was hoping we could clear the air." "The air is perfectly clear, Justin," I replied, not inviting him inside. "I heard your plans with my own ears. You intended to move me out of my home under false pretenses." His smile faltered. "That's a harsh interpretation. We were concerned about your well-being. If that were true, you would have had an honest conversation with me about your concerns." I kept my voice level, determined not to give him the angry confrontation he probably expected. "Instead, you plotted behind my back and used my love for my daughter and granddaughter as leverage." After several more failed attempts at manipulation, he finally revealed his true purpose. "Look, Amanda's talking about separation. She's been staying at Laurel's for weeks. If you just tell her you forgive me, that we can all move forward as a family." "I can't give you what you haven't earned," I told him simply. "Trust and forgiveness are rebuilt through actions, not convenient words when you need something." He left angry and empty-handed. 2 days later, Amanda called to tell me she had filed for separation and was considering divorce. "It wasn't just what happened with the house," she explained. "Once I started really looking at our marriage, I realized how much manipulation and deception there's been. The financial lies, the way he isolates me from friends who question him, how he uses Sophia as a bargaining chip. My heart ached for her difficult path, but swelled with pride at her courage. Your mother faced tough choices too, early in our marriage when my drinking became a problem. She loved me enough to demand better, to set boundaries that forced me to change." This revelation surprised Amanda. "You never told me that." "Some lessons are private until they become relevant to someone else's journey," I explained. "Martha gave me an ultimatum, the alcohol or our marriage. It was the kindest, hardest gift anyone ever gave me." As summer arrived, my new life took shape. My cottage, though smaller than the lakehouse, suited me perfectly. The single-story layout eliminated stairs, the yard was manageable, and I had converted the second bedroom into a modest workshop where I could continue creating furniture. Barbara lived 3 doors down, and we often shared meals and card games. Amanda and Sophia moved into an apartment after her divorce was finalized with surprising speed, Justin having agreed to generous terms rather than risk the financial scrutiny a contested divorce would bring. She found a position with an engineering firm closer to my new home, and we established a tradition of Sunday dinners together. The most unexpected development came from Frank. After separating from Diane, who refused to accept any responsibility for their part in the scheme, he reached out to make amends in earnest. Initially, our conversations were awkward, but over time, a tentative friendship formed based on shared interests in woodworking and history. I let myself be carried along by stronger personalities for decades, he confessed during one of our workshop sessions, where I was teaching him to make a simple bookshelf, first Diane's, then Justin's. I knew better, but saying no seemed harder than going along. It's never too late to find your voice, I told him, guiding his hands as he learned to make a proper dovetail joint. Martha used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting rightly despite it. As the first anniversary of that fateful Thanksgiving approached, I invited Amanda, Sophia, Barbara, Frank, and a few close friends to a dinner at my cottage. Around the table, looking at the faces of those who had proven to be true family regardless of blood ties, I offered a toast. A year ago, I lost a house but found clarity. When Martha was alive, she always said home isn't a building. It's the honesty and respect that fill the space between people. I've learned that lesson more deeply this year than ever before. Amanda raised her glass, her eyes bright. To Mom's wisdom and to Dad's courage to stand up for himself when it would have been easier to give in. Later that evening, after others had left, Amanda and I sat on my small porch watching Sophia play in the yard. "Do you ever miss the lakehouse, Dad?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But buildings are just structures. What matters is having the freedom to make your own choices and being surrounded by people who respect them." "I keep thinking about how close I came to betraying those values Mom and you taught me," she said. "How easily I justified it by telling myself it was for your benefit." "The hardest deceptions are the ones we tell ourselves," I replied. "When we convince ourselves that something self-serving is actually for someone else's good." She nodded thoughtfully. "I've been so careful about the lessons I'm teaching Sophia now, about honesty, respect, and standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. That's the real inheritance," I told her, watching my granddaughter chase fallen leaves across the yard. "Not property or money, but values that guide decisions when life gets complicated." In the years since losing my beloved lake house, I had gained something more valuable, a deeper understanding of myself and the courage to define my own path forward. I had learned that age didn't diminish my right to self-determination or require surrendering control to younger generations, regardless of their claims of concern. Most importantly, I had discovered that family isn't defined by blood or legal ties alone, but by the respect, honesty, and support we offer one another. True family lifts us up rather than schemes to use us for personal gain. As the sun set on my modest new home, I felt Martha's presence in the principles I had defended and the wisdom I could now pass to Amanda and Sophia. Some lessons can only be learned through painful experience, but they are often the ones that transform us most profoundly. I often wonder what would have happened if I had confronted Justin immediately upon overhearing his Thanksgiving scheme. Would it have prevented the painful months that followed? Perhaps. But sometimes the longer path teaches us more about ourselves and others than any shortcut ever could. If my story teaches anything, it's that we are never too old to stand up for ourselves, never too vulnerable to demand respect, and never too trusting to verify the intentions of those who claim to act in our best interest. Age brings wisdom that deserves acknowledgement, not manipulation disguised as concern. What about your family relationships? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against those who should have supported you? Or have you recognized manipulation disguised as help? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your power and dignity. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that home is wherever your boundaries are respected and your worth is recognized.